Good day and welcome to my channel. Please subscribe for more. Thank you. The door to room 214 was partially ajar, like it was waiting for her. The soft scent of antiseptic hung in the hallway, but beneath it was something else, roses, maybe. Faint. Fading. Clara Evans stood outside the door for a moment longer than she meant to, glancing down at the patient chart in her hands. Victor Langston. Age, 57. Diagnosis, metastatic pancreatic cancer. DNR signed. Estimated time, weeks, possibly days. She exhaled slowly, pressed her lips together, and knocked once. Firm, but not intrusive. A gruff voice floated out. Come in, unless you're selling salvation. Clara pushed the door open and stepped inside. Victor Langston was seated near the window, angled slightly toward the late afternoon sun, though his eyes weren't on the view. They were on her, sharp, clear, and far more alert than she expected for someone on palliative care. His frame was lean, almost gaunt, but he still held himself like a man used to being obeyed. She offered a warm, neutral smile. Mr. Langston, I'm Clara Evans. I'll be one of your assigned nurses starting today. He studied her without returning the smile. What happened to the last one? She took a position in oncology. Closer to home, I heard. Convenient. He looked back toward the window. So they sent me someone new. Again. Clara didn't flinch. This wasn't her first tough patient. I understand change can be frustrating, she said gently, placing his chart on the side table. But I'm here to help. You can call me Clara. He didn't respond. She glanced around the room. Tastefully furnished, private, with large windows that overlooked the grounds. A single framed photo sat on the nightstand, a younger Victor with a woman and child, faces turned to the ocean behind them. The woman's eyes sparkled, the child mid-laugh. It looked like a life paused mid-happiness. Clara made a mental note. Personal history, maybe a soft entry point, later. For now, she moved to check his vitals. Would you mind? You're going to anyway. She nodded, gently taking his wrist. His pulse was steady, his skin cool. Any new discomfort? Nausea? Dizziness? No, a pause. Not yet. She wrote a few notes on his chart, then adjusted the 4-line. He watched her with that same unblinking stare. You're younger than the others. I get that a lot. Too soft-spoken to be a nurse. Too kind. I'm firm when it counts. We'll see. The room fell quiet again, save for the faint hum of the machines. Clara finished her assessment, then turned toward him. I'll be back later this evening. If you need anything before then, press the call button. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Clara. She looked back. I don't want pity. Her response came without hesitation. You won't get it. Their eyes held for a moment. A beat too long. Then she nodded once and left. The staff lounge was nearly empty when Clara entered later. She poured herself a cup of tea, her mind still half in room 214. Victor Langston. The Victor Langston. His name had echoed through business headlines for decades. Real estate empires, luxury tech ventures, the kind of man who made and broke markets with a single phone call. And now, he was dying, alone, prickly, and watching the sun set like it owed him an explanation. You survived, came a voice behind her. Clara turned to see Maya, another nurse on the floor. Sharp, sarcastic, and someone Clara already liked after just 2 shifts. Barely, Clara said with a tired smile. Is he always like that? Only on weekdays, Maya said, sitting down with her yogurt. And weekends. And holidays. Clara sipped her tea. Maya tilted her head. You're not rattled. I've seen worse. Maya narrowed her eyes. Yeah, but have you seen billionaires with death wishes and trust issues? Clara didn't answer right away. No, she admitted softly. But I've seen people who lost more than money. Maya raised her eyebrows but didn't push. That evening, Clara returned to room 214. The sun was gone, replaced by a gentle gray dusk. Victor sat in the same position, though now a blanket was draped across his lap. She knocked lightly. Evening. You're back. Shift's not over yet. He nodded toward the chair by his bed. Sit, if you're going to hover. Clara sat. They were quiet for a while. Outside, crickets began their nightly song. Finally, he spoke. Do you believe in legacy? Clara looked at him. That depends. You mean what we leave behind, or how we're remembered? Both. She thought for a moment. I think legacy is what people feel when they speak your name. Victor's lips twitched. Almost a smile. That's poetic. It's practical. He looked at her again. And what do you want your legacy to be, Nurse Evans? Clara hesitated. I want to be remembered as someone who showed up. Who stayed when it was hard. Who made people feel less alone. He looked away. Then you're in the wrong room. I don't think so. He let out a low breath. Not quite a sigh. Not quite resignation. Clara rose. Good night, Mr. Langston. Victor, he said softly. You can call me Victor. She paused. Good night, Victor. Clara closed the door to her small room with a quiet click, shutting out the dim hallway of the hospice. It had been a long day, but she wasn't tired, not in the physical sense, anyway. The bedside lamp cast a soft amber glow across the modest space. Her suitcase sat half unpacked at the foot of the bed. A single framed photo of her late father stood beside a ceramic candle on the windowsill, her anchor in places like this. She changed into cotton pajamas, tied her hair back, and sat down at the small wooden desk beside the window. Outside, the night was still. No traffic. Just the hum of the garden sprinklers and the chirping of crickets. Clara opened her leather-bound journal and smoothed out the page. March 17th. First day on palliative rotation. Assigned to room 214. Victor Langston. She paused, pen hovering. A man used to being listened to, not cared for. Sharp eyes. Dry wit. Tired soul. She wrote slowly, thoughtfully. He watched me like he was waiting for me to fail. But he called me Clara by the end of the day. That means something, right? Her handwriting dipped slightly on that line. She blinked, set the pen down, and stared out the window. There was a sadness in him. It wasn't just about the cancer. It went deeper, like the illness was simply the final chapter in a life full of silent pages. She knew that look. She had seen it once in her mother's eyes, the year after her father died. Grief disguised as pride. Silence mistaken for strength. Clara ran her fingers along the edge of the page, then closed the journal gently. I don't want pity. His words echoed again in her mind. You won't get it, she had replied. And she meant it. But there was something in her chest now, not pity. Something else. A quiet pull. She turned off the light, but even in the dark, his eyes stayed with her. Victor sat in a wheelchair beneath the jacaranda tree, the afternoon sun casting soft lavender shadows across the walkway. A light blanket lay across his knees, and a paperback novel sat unread on his lap. Clara appeared with a tray, 2 cups of tea and a slice of pawpaw cut neatly into cubes. You don't have to play hostess, Victor said as she set it down on the small side table. I'm not. I just hate drinking alone, she replied. That earned the tiniest curl at the edge of his mouth. She sat down beside him, not too close, not too far. The kind of distance you offer someone who needs space but shouldn't be alone. They sipped in silence for a while. The birds were busy in the trees, and the scent of hibiscus floated through the breeze. You were right, Victor said after a moment. Clara looked at him. About what? You're not soft. She raised an eyebrow. Is that your version of a compliment? It's my version of not pretending. She smiled a little, turned toward the garden. You know what I think? I'm bracing myself. I think you've spent a lot of your life being brilliant, but not very known. Victor didn't respond. Instead, he let the silence stretch, and that, in itself, was an answer. Clara leaned back and looked up through the branches, where the sun blinked through the purple blossoms. It's a good day, she said quietly. Victor didn't look at her. But he nodded. Just once. Victor sat by the open window, a blanket over his legs, the soft sounds of jazz drifting from a small Bluetooth speaker Clara had brought in that morning. Miles Davis, kind of blue, filled the corners of the room like sunlight that didn't need to be seen to be felt. Clara walked in with his morning meds and paused at the door, surprised. You like jazz? She asked. I like music that doesn't beg. For your attention, he replied without looking at her. She stepped closer. This was my dad's favorite record. That made him glance at her. Smart man. He was. She placed the meds on his tray and sat across from him. Victor leaned his head back against the chair and closed his eyes. For a long time, I only listened to things that kept my mind moving, news, deals, data. Silence made me feel like I was wasting time. And now? He didn't open his eyes. Now I think silence was trying to tell me something. I just wasn't ready to listen. Clara nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to the window, to the jacaranda tree swaying in rhythm with the music. They sat there for several minutes, saying nothing. And for once, the silence between them wasn't hollow. It was full. Later that afternoon, as the light began to shift gold and the garden outside cast long shadows across the floor, Clara came in to find Victor dressed, sitting up straighter than usual. You going somewhere? She asked, amused. I want to go outside. Alone. Clara tilted her head. You're not cleared for solo walks, Victor. I'm not asking for a marathon, he said. Just the bench. I don't know. Air. Space. She hesitated, then nodded. I'll be close. But I'll give you the illusion of independence. He smirked. That's all any of us really wants, isn't it? She helped him down the hall and onto the bench in the garden, then pretended to check her phone from a short distance, glancing up every so often. Victor sat still for a while, then slowly pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He read it, eyes narrowing. Then he tore it in half and let the pieces fall into the wind. Clara didn't ask. He didn't offer. But something in the air between them shifted, like he'd left something behind out there. The hallway lights were dimmed. Most patients were asleep. The staff rotation was quiet. Clara finished her charting, stretched her fingers, and looked up to find Victor's door still partially open. She walked in gently. He was awake. You don't sleep much, she said. He turned his head toward her. Too many thoughts. Too little time to have them. Clara sat in the chair by his bed, arms crossed casually over her chest. Did you always talk like a poet, or is this a hospice thing? He laughed, an actual laugh, not just air through his nose. I used to talk like a shark. Boardrooms and banks. Deals and deadlines. It made people listen. They still do. He shook his head. They listen differently now. There was a beat of quiet. I used to think I'd die on a jet. Or in a tower I built. But here I am, in a soft bed, drinking lukewarm tea, talking to a nurse who doesn't fear me. She smiled softly. Why would I fear you? Because most people did. Well, Clara said, I'm not most people. He looked at her. Really looked. No. You're not. And in that moment, in the low light, with the jazz still faintly playing, they were not Nurse and Patient. They were two people. Just trying to be seen. The morning started differently. Clara noticed at the moment she walked past the front desk. The usual calm hum of the hospice was punctuated by low murmurs and a brief phone conversation at the nurse's station. Room 214, one of the nurses asked behind the counter. No, I don't think she's here yet. Clara stepped closer. That was for me. The nurse, a young man named David, nodded. He asked for you. Said he'd wait. Victor. Clara didn't say anything as she signed into the system. But she felt it, something between curiosity and warmth low in her chest. She checked his chart, no sudden symptoms, vitals stable. Still, he'd asked for her. By name. When Clara walked in, Victor was already sitting up, a thick book open on his lap. You rang? She teased. Victor gave her a slow look, then motioned toward the book. Have you ever read this? She crossed the room. Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Of course. I think every Nigerian child has had to wrestle with Okonkwo's stubbornness. Victor closed the book gently, tapping the cover once with his hand. My father gave me this copy when I was 16. Wrote my name in the back cover. He never read it himself, but he said one day I'd need to. Clara sat on the edge of the guest chair, her voice soft. And did you? Not until now. He paused. I didn't understand what he meant. Not back then. What do you think he meant now? Victor's eyes stayed on the window. That strength without grace leads to ruin. That silence isn't always strength. That pride. He stopped himself. Clara finished for him, can bury more than it builds. He looked at her then, truly present. You're very good at seeing people. Only when they let me. He held her gaze. For once, he didn't deflect. Later that evening, as Clara helped him adjust the pillows and lower the bed to rest, she noticed a photograph on the nightstand she hadn't seen before. It had been face down. She lifted it gently. Victor stiffened. The photo showed a woman, beautiful, striking, standing beside a younger version of him, their arms around a small boy. All three smiled, but there was something in Victor's younger eyes. An ache, even then. She was your wife. Victor's voice was low. Ex-wife. We divorced 8 years ago. And the boy? My son. Emmanuel. Clara waited. Victor continued, barely audible. He stopped talking to me 5 years ago. I think I earned that. Clara placed the photo back carefully. People don't stop loving easily. They do when they learn who you really are. Clara shook her head. Or when they don't know how much you've changed. Victor looked at her, the pain behind his pride suddenly unguarded. I think you give me too much credit. I think you don't give yourself enough. That night, Clara stayed longer. She brought in tea, not part of the protocol, but comforting. They talked. About literature. About Lagos. About the different ways people measure time, in hours, in regrets, in laughter. Clara stood to leave finally, her hand brushing his briefly as she reached for the empty teacup. The contact made them both pause. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. There was no need for words in that moment. Just breath. Just presence. And something too new, too fragile, to name. The early morning light was pale and quiet, filtering through the sheer curtains of room 214 in muted gold. Clara stepped in as she had a dozen times before, chart in hand, steps silent but steady. Victor was already awake, or maybe he hadn't slept. He was propped up slightly, eyes distant, as if watching something only he could see. "Morning," Clara said gently. He didn't answer right away. She moved closer, checked the 4-line, adjusted the oxygen monitor clip to his finger. His skin was warm, but the edges of his energy were different. Thinner. "You feeling okay?" "I'm here, aren't I?" His voice was quieter than usual. Not sharp, just tired. She didn't press. She glanced at his chart. Slight fever. Slight dip in oxygen saturation. Nothing drastic. But enough to say something was beginning to shift. She looked up. "Let me know if anything feels different." Victor met her eyes. "It all feels different." It was just past noon when Clara found him sitting outside in the garden, his blanket wrapped loosely around his shoulders. The jacaranda tree offered light purple shade, and a soft breeze carried the scent of hibiscus. She walked over and was about to speak when he turned and handed her a small, folded item wrapped in cloth. She hesitated. "What's this?" Victor looked at her steadily. "Something I carried too long." Clara slowly unwrapped it, revealing an old pen. A fountain pen, black and gold, worn by years of handling but still elegant. "I used this to sign my first real contract," he said. "The one that changed everything." She ran her fingers over the smooth metal. "It's beautiful. It's also just a pen." Clara looked up, sensing the deeper meaning behind the gesture. Victor continued, "I thought things mattered more when you earned them. Now I think things matter more when you give them away." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. So she didn't. She just sat beside him, their shoulders brushing gently, and held the pen with both hands, like something delicate, something with history. The rain had started just after sunset, gentle and rhythmic against the windows. Clara had already finished her rounds, but something pulled her back to room 214. She knocked once, softly. Victor looked up from the book on his lap. "You again?" "I couldn't sleep," she lied. He gestured toward the chair. "Sit." She did. They sat in comfortable quiet for a moment, listening to the sound of the rain. Clara finally spoke. "When my father was dying, he wouldn't let us in." Victor looked at her. "He said he wanted to protect us from watching him fade. But all it did was make us feel shut out. Like we lost him before we actually lost him." She looked at Victor now, her eyes steady. "I'm not going to let you do that." Victor blinked slowly. "You always talk like you already know the ending." "I'm a nurse," she said. "I've learned that how a story ends is only one part of the story." He turned his head away. "I don't know how to let someone stay." "Try," she said. A beat passed. 2. Victor reached over, his fingers brushing the back of her hand, tentative, testing. She turned her palm to meet his. Their fingers interlocked slowly, as if they'd done it before in a dream. Victor opened his mouth, just slightly. He began. But the words didn't come. And Clara didn't ask him to finish. She just stayed there beside him, holding his hand, as the rain whispered on the glass. The rain had softened to a hush outside, like the world was holding its breath. Victor's hand was still in hers, their fingers gently entwined. Neither of them had moved in several minutes, but the space between them had changed, quiet, charged, waiting. Clara looked at the clock. "I should let you rest." Victor's grip tightened, just slightly. "Don't go yet," he said, voice lower now, closer to something he wasn't used to sharing. "Stay. Just a little longer." Clara hesitated, then sat back down. "I don't want to be alone tonight," he added, his eyes searching hers. "Not with this, not with how it feels now." Clara didn't look away. "Victor." He cut her off gently, not forcefully. I know it's wrong to want something more from you. I know you're here because it's your job. But when you talk, I listen. When you touch me, even just checking vitals, I feel something again. He swallowed. And it's not just comfort, Clara. It's you. And more. Clara's breath caught in her throat. He leaned forward slightly, with effort. I haven't been touched. Not really touched, by someone who saw me in years. You do. And now I want more. I need to feel something that reminds me I'm still alive. Her heart beat faster, but her voice was steady. Victor, if this is about fear. It's not, he said, and his voice cracked, just once. It's about you. And how I've never asked for anything real until now. The silence between them now wasn't tense. It was honest. Clara looked at him, not just the illness, not just the sharp mind, not even the vulnerability. She looked at the man. And he waited. Not assuming. Not pressing. Just hoping. Waiting for her answer. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a long moment, Clara just stood there. She pressed her back gently against the wall in the dim hallway of the hospice, breathing through the swell of emotion she couldn't name. Victor's words from minutes ago still echoed in her head. It's not about fear. It's about you. And how I've never asked for anything real until now. She closed her eyes. Clara Evans was not reckless. Not easily shaken. She had spent the last 5 years keeping people comfortable while the world let them go. She'd learned how to hold back the ocean of grief without drowning. But Victor wasn't just another patient. He didn't ask her to fix him. He asked her to see him. And she had. That was the problem. She ran a hand over her face, calming her breath. She didn't go home. Instead, she walked back inside hours later, without speaking, and sat beside his bed until dawn. Clara stirred her tea in slow circles the next morning in the staff lounge, her eyes unfocused. Across from her, Maya studied her for a long moment before breaking the silence. You look like you just walked through a fire and came out steam. Clara gave a dry laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. Long shift, she said. Maya wasn't buying it. You want to talk about it? Clara hesitated. Then, he asked me for something I wasn't ready to give. Maya didn't blink. Close. Clara's head snapped up. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, Maya replied. You've been hovering around room 214 like you're waiting for a sign. Clara looked down. He's not just anyone. I know. Maya leaned in. You think you're the only person who's ever caught feelings for someone on the edge of life? It doesn't mean you're unprofessional. It means you're human. Clara was quiet. Maya softened. Just ask yourself one thing, if he weren't sick, would you still want him? Clara answered without hesitation. Yes. Maya nodded. Then the rest is yours to figure out. Later that afternoon, Victor stood at the edge of the hallway, gripping the wheels of his chair, waiting. He didn't ask her to come. He just waited. Clara appeared in the doorway and smiled faintly. Ready? He gave a soft, tired nod. They moved slowly through the back garden. The air was sweet and light, and the gold of the afternoon sun washed over everything with warmth. Victor's pace was slower than it had been just days ago, but he held himself with grace. Clara walked beside him, offering her arm only when needed. When they reached the jacaranda tree, he paused. Clara looked up at the petals swaying above them. I used to come here during breaks, before I even met you. I know, Victor said quietly. I watched you. She raised an eyebrow. He chuckled, tired. Not in a creepy way. You looked peaceful. Clara looked at him. And now? "You're not peaceful," he said. "You're lit up. And I'm drawn to it." He paused, then added gently, "You're beautiful, Clara." Her eyes didn't flinch away. "Victor," she said softly, "I'm afraid of losing you." "I'm afraid of dying," he admitted. "But more than that, I'm afraid of never having really lived." Their hands met between them. And this time, she didn't let go. Reckless. Not easily shaken. She had spent the last 5 years keeping people comfortable while the world let them go. She'd learned how to hold back the ocean of grief without burden. The rain tapped gently against the windows, steady and slow, as if reminding them the world was still out there, but distant now. Clara entered room 214 without knocking. Victor was awake, propped up slightly. The room was dim, lit only by a small bedside lamp and the distant city glow through the curtains. She sat beside him. Not in the chair this time. On the edge of his bed. Neither of them spoke. Victor looked at her hand, resting beside his. "I didn't expect you to come back," he said. "I didn't know I would," she replied. He reached out, slowly, palm up, a question, not a command. Clara placed her hand in his. "I don't know what happens next," she whispered. "But I'm still here." Victor exhaled softly, not from relief, but surrender. He closed his eyes. And in that quiet, in-between place, between longing and restraint, fear and tenderness, they simply existed. Together. The hospice room was quiet except for the soft rhythm of rain against the window. Victor sat on the edge of his bed, his hands clasped in his lap. The bedside lamp cast a golden halo over the room, its light spilling across the polished floor like warmth refusing to leave. Clara sat beside him in the chair, still wearing her scrubs. Her hair was tied back loosely, wisps curling at her temples. They had been talking for an hour. Not about symptoms. Not about medication. Just life. "I thought," Victor said, breaking a long silence, "when the time came, I'd be angry. Bitter. Maybe numb. But instead, I just feel unfinished." Clara looked at him gently. "You're still here." He glanced sideways at her. "Barely." She didn't flinch. "Enough." Victor turned toward her. "I didn't think I'd be afraid to ask. But I am." "Ask what?" "To be with you. Not because I'm dying. But because I'm alive. And for once, I want something just because it's beautiful." Clara's throat tightened. The rain outside fell harder. Inside, everything was still. She stood. Moved slowly toward him. He looked up, uncertain, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. She reached out and took his hand. "I'm here," she said. "And I'm not doing this because you asked." He said nothing, only watched her as she pulled back the blanket and sat beside him on the bed. Her voice was soft. "I'm doing this because I want to remember what it feels like, to choose someone. Even when it's complicated. Even when it's hard." Victor exhaled, shaky, relieved. It happened. The rain continued, but neither of them heard it. The lamp stayed on, low and warm, casting shadows across the room. Clara woke before sunrise. The rain had stopped. Victor lay still. She watched him quietly. A tear slid down her cheek, not of sadness, not exactly. Of fullness. And whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Victor stirred slightly, eyes opened. Clara stepped through the hospice corridor just as the sun broke through the clouds. The floor was quiet, a different kind of quiet. Not the silence of sleep, but the silence after something important has happened. Her shoes tapped gently along the tiles. Her hair was still damp from a rushed shower. She'd returned to her room at 5 a.m., changed out of the clothes that had held his warmth, and avoided every reflective surface along the way. Maya stood just outside the staff lounge, a steaming mug of tea in her hand. She didn't say anything. Just looked at Clara with that half-smile, the kind only a friend offers when words aren't needed. Clara gave a faint nod and walked past her without speaking. She needed a few more minutes inside herself before she let the world back in. Later, when she sat alone reviewing patient charts, she paused at room 214. Victor's vitals had slipped. Only slightly. But she saw it. The dip in his oxygen levels. The slower heart rate. The edge they'd been circling together was inching closer. Her hand hovered over the chart. Love wasn't going to stop the decline. But it had changed everything anyway. She knocked gently before stepping into his room. Victor was propped up in bed, more tired than the night before, but peaceful. His eyes tracked her from the moment she entered. Without speaking, he reached to the table beside him and handed her an envelope. Her name was written on it in clean, deliberate strokes, Clara. For later, he said softly. Not now. When it matters most. Clara took it, folding it carefully between her fingers. The weight of it, the unspoken truth it held, made her chest ache. Victor gave her a quiet smile. Still here? She smiled back. Still here. They didn't need to speak about the night before. It was written in the way they moved now, how they looked at each other, no longer from behind walls. That afternoon, Clara wheeled Victor out into the garden. The sky was glowing amber, and birds drifted lazily through the warm air. Flowers bent in the soft wind. The jacaranda tree scattered its petals like gentle farewells on the stone path. Victor was weaker. She could feel it in the way he leaned into her hand, in the pauses between his breaths. They sat on the bench together, his blanket tucked over his legs. Clara rested her hand on his, watching his fingers, once steady, now thin and still. He looked out across the garden, then leaned his head against her shoulder. If this is the end, he said softly, it's not such a bad one. Clara didn't answer. Her voice was trapped behind the lump in her throat. Instead, she rested her head gently against his. They didn't need to speak. Not now. That night, Clara sat in her room alone. The cup of tea on her desk had long gone cold. The candle beside it burned low, flickering shadows across the handwritten envelope now unfolded in her hands. Victor's voice echoed through the words. Clara. I never thought I'd meet someone who could both undo me and help me find myself at the same time. I spent most of my life building towers out of pride and pretending they were made of strength. You walked in, didn't try to tear them down, you just showed me there was something better outside of them. What we shared wasn't a transaction. It wasn't an escape. It was truth. And no matter what happens next, know this. You made my final days feel like a beginning. Don't carry me with sadness. Carry me with light. Victor. Her tears came quietly. No sobbing. Just warmth sliding down her face, pooling at her chin. She folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. And for the first time since she'd met him, she let herself cry not for the man she might lose, but for the love she had actually found. The morning light spilled softly across the floor of room 214, golden and slow, like it understood something the rest of the world didn't. Victor was awake when Clara entered. He looked tired, but not in pain. Peaceful. Worn, but luminous in that still, quiet way he sometimes carried himself. I didn't think you'd sleep, she said gently. I did. Maybe for the first time in weeks. Clara set a fresh cup of tea on his tray, but he didn't reach for it. Instead, he nodded toward the small wooden box on the dresser. Can you bring that here? She picked it up carefully and placed it in his lap. Victor ran his fingers over the carved lid. I haven't opened this since the day I got here. I wasn't sure if I ever would. He lifted the latch slowly, the metal soft with age. Inside were a few items, an old photo of him holding a baby boy. A faded newspaper clipping. A USB drive. And a folded piece of paper. I used to think if I locked this part of me away, I wouldn't have to face what I left behind, he said. Clara sat beside him, saying nothing. I need you to help me record something, he continued. It's for Emmanuel. My son. Clara blinked. You've never mentioned him before. I didn't earn the right to. But now, if I can't leave him time, I want to leave him truth. She nodded slowly, placing her hand over his. Let's do it together. 3 days later, Clara stood at the edge of the hospice garden, arms crossed over her chest as a stranger approached. He looked like Victor, tall, sharp jawline, intelligent eyes. But his expression was hard, reserved. As if the years had taught him to expect disappointment. Emmanuel? Clara asked softly. He nodded. You said, he left me something. She gestured toward the shaded bench. It's a video. He made it 3 days ago. Clara handed him a tablet. She didn't speak as he watched. Only waited. Victor's voice filled the small space between them. I never gave you what you deserved. I gave you distance, silence, and shadows. But you deserved presence, truth, and love. I just didn't know how to give them. If you're watching this, it means I'm finally quiet. But I hope this brings some kind of noise into your memory of me. A real sound. A real man. I loved you. Even if I failed you. When it ended, Emmanuel said nothing. Clara reached into her pocket and handed him the photo from the box. Victor with the baby boy. Emmanuel's hands trembled slightly. I hated him, he said quietly. Clara didn't flinch. You don't have to stop, she replied. But maybe you can begin something else. He nodded once. And that was enough. That night, the hospice was silent. Clara stepped into room 214 alone. Victor was asleep, his breathing slow but steady. The lamp by his bed glowed warmly, painting his face in the soft gold of half-light. She stood there for a long time, just looking at him. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the pen. The same one he'd given her weeks ago, when she still saw herself as his nurse, not someone whose heart he would change forever. She placed it gently on the bedside table, beside the photo of him and Emmanuel. Then she leaned down and kissed his forehead. You kept your promise, she whispered. You didn't die before being known. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Clara turned away, her eyes glassy but dry. She didn't look back as she walked out. But she carried him with her, in the space just behind her ribs, in the silence that now felt full instead of empty. The call came just after sunrise. Maya was the one who found him, quiet, still, peaceful. Victor had passed sometime in the early hours. No distress. No sudden drop. Just silence, like sleep deciding not to end. Clara didn't cry. She stood outside his room for a moment, hand pressed to the door, her forehead leaning against the frame. Inside, the light had begun to stretch across the floor. She stepped in. There he was, arms folded gently across his chest, as if he'd been holding something even in the end. The pen was still there on the bedside table. So was the photo. Clara walked to his side, knelt down, and placed her hand over his heart. Thank you, she whispered. And meant it. Days later, she sat by the window in her apartment, sunlight brushing across her skin like memory. She unfolded the second letter, the one she hadn't dared read until now. Victor's handwriting was neat. Final. Like a man who knew he wouldn't get a second draft. Clara. If you're reading this, then I've become part of your past. But please don't leave me there. Let me be part of the way you see the world. Let me be part of the quiet moments, the soft mornings, the decision to stay when it's easier to run. You gave me something no medicine, no legacy, no wealth ever could, you gave me presence. I'm not asking you to remember me every day. I'm asking you to live. Really live. And when you feel the rain, or smell gardenia, or hear a song that slows your heartbeat, know I'm not far. You were my last wish. And you came true. Victor. Clara folded the letter slowly, holding it in her lap for a long time before pressing it to her chest. She didn't weep this time. She closed her eyes, and smiled. Spring came early that year. On a sunny afternoon, Clara walked into the garden at the hospice, not as a nurse this time, but simply as herself. She sat on the bench beneath the jacaranda tree. A breeze stirred the petals, scattering purple across the stones. It reminded her of that day, of laughter, of touch, of the way Victor had leaned gently into her shoulder without asking. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small card. It had the name of a free community clinic printed across the top, a new job offer. A quieter role. Less death. More beginning. She ran her fingers across it once, then tucked it back inside her jacket. Before she left the garden, she paused. A child's voice rang out across the courtyard, someone visiting. Someone alive. Clara turned toward the sound, heart lifted, and walked forward. Not away. Just forward. Thanks for watching.